Good evening, everyone, and welcome to ACP Live, a work in progress showcase and discussion series featuring Queens Council on the Arts Artist Commissioning Program awardees. My name is Kelly Olshan, and I'm a program manager at Queens Council on the Arts. Tonight, we are thrilled to highlight the work of Marcus Yi alongside partnering organizations Flushing Town Hall and Queens Historical Society. Marcus is the creator of Lucky 88 Food Court, the musical, and this year's ACP awardee in playwriting representing the Flushing neighborhood. Every year, this program focuses on two neighborhoods in Queens. This year, we're highlighting the community of Flushing, as well as the Maspeth Ridgewood area. But before we dive in, I want to give you a little bit of background on the Artist Commissioning Program itself. QCA's Artist Commissioning Program aims to democratize who can commission art, a process that has traditionally been preserved for a privileged few. So rather than a few wealthy individuals deciding what new culture is created and celebrated, we invite a cohort of amazing Queens community members to decide which artists should receive $10,000 commissions to create new work. These art commissioners award commissions to playwrights, choreographers, and composers to tell untold stories that resonate with their communities, and throughout the development process, advise the artists in their new work creation. Several of these art commissioners will be joining us for tonight's discussion, and I'm really excited for you to get to meet these incredible Flushing community members and arts advocates. But first, it is my pleasure to introduce the artist, the playwright, songwriter, and visionary behind Lucky 88 Food Court, the musical, Marcus Yi. A man of many talents, Marcus is an award-winning musical theater writer and composer. In his work, he explores themes of immigration, workers' rights, intergenerational conflict, geriatric dating, and intercultural exchange with humor and aplomb. Before receiving this $10,000 commission from QCA, he has been the recipient of many other awards and distinctions, including but not limited to the 11th Annual New Jersey Playwrights Contest and one of Indie Theater Now's 2014 People of the Year. His work has been produced by the National Asian Artists Project, Prospect Theater, Pan Asian Rep, among others. Marcus, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus, and I'm a musical theater writer, composer, and director. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm really excited to share with you excerpts from my new musical, Lucky 88. So Lucky 88 is a musical that is set in a Flushing food court, and I believe it is the first musical to be set in a Flushing food court. I was really inspired by the food courts of Flushing because I used to live and work in Flushing, and I would go to the food courts for comfort, for food, and I was always really interested in the lives of the people that work there. Like, what were their secrets? What were their relationships like with their children, their parents? Where did they come from? So when I saw this artist commissioning program proposal, I was really, really excited. And I definitely knew that I wanted to write a musical that was set in a Flushing food court. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the plot. If you don't like spoilers, you want to stick your fingers in your hand and go la 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 for the next couple of minutes while I tell you a little bit about it. So Lucky 88 basically focuses on three food stalls. At the very first food stall, that's the dumpling stall, and that's run by Mei Ling Fu. She's like a 50-something-year-old woman. Her husband passed 5 years ago, and she's sort of trying to figure out, like, what does she want to do for the rest of her life? Does she want to start dating again? Or is she just going to resign her life to, like, a life of solitude and basically not do anything anymore? So that's her plot line for the show. At the stall number two, that's the hand-pulled noodle stall, and that's really run by a father and son team, Shen Zha Wang and Brandon Wang. Shen Zha is a 50-something-year-old man from China, and Brandon is his son who was born in the United States. Brandon has a deep, dark secret. Basically, his father thinks that he's going to law school, but he actually has dropped out and has decided to go to culinary school instead. At the third stall, which is the boba tea stall, if you don't know boba, you should definitely get some. It's amazing. So Si Ling Xiu and Fan Fan are the ones who run that stall. It's a mother-daughter team. Si Ling is the mother, and she's like 50-something years old. She's from Taiwan, and she has her own deep, dark secret. She actually has terminal cancer, and she's not really willing to share that with her daughter. Her daughter, on the other hand, wants to be Lady Gaga. She wants to be a pop star. So definitely a huge source of tension between the mother and daughter and we'll see a couple excerpts from the show today. So, Kelly, why don't you introduce us to the lovely panelists that we have today?
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you for that funny and helpful rundown of the characters at play here. So, everyone, please join me in welcoming three of our seven Flushing Art Commissioners who graced us with their virtual presence this evening. Ladies, as I introduce you, feel free to give a little wave so people know who you are. Um, so in addition to serving on the panel that selected Marcus's project, these women have really made exceptional contributions to the Flushing arts community. So I'm joined by Yayun Ting, who serves as the Director of Chinese Community Initiatives at Flushing Town Hall, Branka Dupnik, the Executive Director of Queens Historical Society, and Jamrie Kim, multidisciplinary artist and educator. Cheers, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Cheers.
So, Marcus, I know that you prepared a couple video clips of your forthcoming musical to show us. Can you tell us a little bit about the first song, Fake It Until You Make It?
Absolutely. So Fake It Till You Make It is actually sung by Fan Fan. As I said before, Fan Fan really wants to be a pop star. She really loves Lady Gaga. So she's trying to audition for the Apollo Theater Amateur Night. For those of you that don't know, like the Apollo Theater actually has like an amateur night. There multiple performers can go audition at. They could be singers or dancers and that sort of thing. So she really wants to get her foot in the door by performing this song. So it's a lovely little pop number, and let's check it out.
Every time you feel the lights start to get low, devil's at your back, you got no place to go. Time is running out like blood drops in the snow. Don't listen to those whispers, find the strength inside, or they'll wear you down like blisters with their pretty little lies. So what if they don't let you in the club? They'll come begging when you blow up. You gotta fake it till you make it. Everybody starts somewhere. You gotta fake it till you make it. Till your name is everywhere. You gotta fake it till you make it. Work that hustle, you gotta shake it. 'Cause till you make it, you gotta fake it. Never thought that dreams would ever get me down, but the fear to fall makes you wanna turn around. Eat you up inside without a single sound. Climbing to the top, that road might take a while. Everyone says stop, don't let them cramp your style. So what if you don't do what other people expect? Just be living your own truth and earning that self-respect. You gotta fake it till you make it, and you make believe. You gotta fake it till you make it. Real's just what we perceive. You gotta fake it till you make it. Hit that wall until you break it. 'Cause till you make it, you gotta fake it. Take it, break it, stake it, fake it. Gotta fake it till you make it. Take it, break it, stake it, fake it. Gotta fake it till you make it. Folks, let me tell you just where it's at. People don't care till you're all that. And who really knows what exactly is real? Is it what you think and how you feel? Is it chemicals in your brain? It's a fine line between normal and insane. Success doesn't come in a given time. How can you rise if you don't even climb? Maybe this idea is just redundant, but start from a place that is abundant. If you don't believe, then no one else will. Life is hard, it's always uphill. You could be amazing or stuck on a shelf. It all depends on yourself.
So Fake It Till You Make It. That song actually does not advance the plot of the show. Oh my god, musical theater lovers all over the world collapse and die. So it actually doesn't, but thematically, I just love the line. I love that it's a pop song. I love that she's actually performing something. Fake It Till You Make It is such a, I don't know, shared experience for a lot of immigrants that come to the United States because, we get here, you might not have the skills, but someone offers you an opportunity, someone offers you a job, and you're like, yeah, I could totally do that. I could totally fake this. And then you make it work, you put the effort behind it, and then you sort of like make it work. And that's really the whole idea behind why this song is in the show. It's not just like a random pop song. It's also like there thematically for like these Asian immigrants that come to the United States and sort of like find their way to make it work, find their way to, have their own American dream, basically.
Thanks, Marcus, for that introduction. And first of all, I just want to say how excited I am to participate in this discussion, and also to say how catchy this song is. I've heard it a couple of times before, and it's just been kind of blowing my mind. So, and I guess I want to ask you a little bit more about your choice in using the language of a musical, and to talk about very kind of stories about Asian culture, intergenerational stories, stories of migration. So it's almost that confluence of the formal aspect of something that's very American, and then you have the very kind of personal stories.
Absolutely. So I've actually been writing musicals for like the last 10 years now. So that's primarily the form that I create in. So it was very natural for me to just, go ahead and write another musical. For me, the reason why it's even more important for this story is because when you look at the Broadway demographics, only less than like 1% of performers on Broadway are of Asian descent. Whereas like when you look at the demographics of Asian Americans in the United States, that's really about around 20%. So that's like a huge disparity. So for me, it's been a really huge challenge and also like sort of an inspiration to want to be able to rectify this problem that I see in musical theater, which is there are not a lot of Asian stories being told, and there are not a lot of opportunities given to Asian and Asian American performers. So it's very, very important for me to be able to tell this in the form of the musical. And I think, Asian people are amazing at singing and dancing anyway. So I was like, it just fits perfectly and just naturally into like the musical form. And that's just how it came to be.
That's true. Thanks.
Yeah, and I remember when the art commissioners were reviewing the proposal, I remember that when seeing Marcus' proposal, I thought musical was actually a really fitting art form. First of all, of course, musical is a very popular art form, and just from my experience working in the Flushing community and observing what's happening in terms of arts and culture. First of all, there's like tremendous amount of arts and cultural activity being organized by people who live around the neighborhood. If you want to say, people's power, or that's definitely a demonstration of a grassroots effort, right? And each event is being tailored and created specifically to like different interest groups, right? So like the kind of activity you can see is sometimes it's a night for some kind of traditional Chinese regional opera, and then the next day will be a Western operatic singing concert done by somebody professionally trained or amateur. Or next day can be someone who's very interested in dance form, and the dance form can range from like traditional folk dance to street dance, jazz dance, and ballroom dances. So just there's a lot of singings and dancing there, and the vibe is always like, very social, very popular, very well attended. So I thought it was really fitting when seeing the proposal. So, I mean, I've always, because in my position, I work with quite some Asian American artists. So I'm curious for Marcus, like, how do you identify yourself? And if your identity influence your process of art making,
I think that I identify myself as an Asian person working in the United States. I don't identify as an Asian American because I was not born here and I did not grow up with that kind of culture. Because growing up in Asia, basically this face is the majority. So like I have no concept of growing up in a country where this face was the minority or anything like that. I guess the only difference between me and a lot of immigrants that come here is that I'm quite fluent in English. So I'm able to articulate my experience pretty well in my professional life as well as in my artistic life. So I would say that I definitely bring a lot of that into my work. When I do create stories that are Asian and Asian American, I'm also very aware of the differences between Asians and Asian Americans. And that was a big part for me for this show, which was to highlight those differences. We have the older generation and then we have the younger generation. When I was doing research for the show, I saw a lot of information about Asian Americans, about their experiences and what they were like growing up, how they related to their parents. But I found absolutely no information at all when it came to like the older generation, the immigrant generation, primarily because, they're older, they don't speak English, they're not able to articulate the experience as much. So for me, it was really, really important to be able to bring that experience and put it into a musical so that we have a nice balanced view and not just sort of lump it all into like this giant Asian American thing. Also, like Asia is like the largest continent in the world, so there are like multiple perspectives from different parts of Asian people all over the world. Some of them get along better with others, some of them don't, and that's perfectly fine. But that's just so to lump them all in just one giant category of just Asian is sort of like reducing them to like a very specific and boring template. And I think like once you get really deep into like the specificity of things, then that's where the more interesting stories lie. And also that's when you start to realize that we actually share a lot of very universal themes, a lot of very universal conflicts, relationships with parents, dealing with death, dealing with loss and grief. These are things that just because we're human beings, we're all going to experience them no matter what our culture, no matter what our skin or race is. In terms of being a creator, I don't think it has been like an impediment being like an Asian person. I've definitely had people support my work that were not Asian and people who did not support my work who were Asian. So I think it sort of balances out in the long run. And I think it's really more about creating the work and finding your audience, finding the audience that you're trying to reach, and and then also figuring out like, well, why are you trying to engage this community and how can you better serve the community rather than trying to chase after cultural gatekeepers who you think might be able to get you to the next level. So for me, it's really more about who is my audience and how can I reach them. If the cultural gatekeepers want to come along for the ride, great. But then that's not why the work exists in the first place. The work exists because I'm really interested in telling stories from my own cultural experience, my own unique experience that is, not necessarily cultural in nature, but also like just my own weird Marcus E. contrarian experience or something like that. And just trying to figure out who are these other people out there who might be, wandering in the dark, trying to figure out, is there someone like me? Is there someone who I can relate to? Is there someone who has my quirky sense of humor or something like that? And then that's the reason why I create art.
Yeah, and I remember that one thing that I remember most about your proposal is when reading the characters that you set up. I just feel like, I kind of know those characters. There's something really real about the characters, and those are the issues that maybe myself or people around me, are concerned with. So I'm just kind of curious, as an artist, like, where did you look for the material, and like, why do you pick, those specific stories to tell?
Right. So whenever I write a show, it really always starts with the conflict. Somebody is trying to get something, somebody else wants to stop them or something like that. So for me, it always started with the conflict. So for example, the father-son conflict came to me really, really early. I was reading an article in the New York Times about Chinese restaurants in all over the United States basically closing down because they basically succeeded in their dream. They built a successful business and they were able to put their children through school. And a lot of their children were now in like, professional jobs. So they weren't really interested in taking over the family business or anything like that. So my thing was, well, what happens if the child actually does want to take over the family business as opposed to like go down the traditional like professional route or something like that. I love food. I love making food. I love watching Food Network. So I love watching like Top Chef. So I was very inspired by like the chefs like David Chang, Anita Lowe, who basically decided that, hey, I am going to take my culture, the food of my people, and sort of like make it into their own in this cultural landscape in the United States. So for me, like that's sort of how I started with like the general ideas first. For like Mei Ling Fu, it really was about later in life dating. I've always been interested in, why is it that some people, especially older Asian women, why are they suddenly relegated to this like sexless life where they're not allowed to even talk about sex anymore. I was also very inspired by my friend Marvin Moschel, who's like 80 something years old. After his wife passed away, he started dating again, and he started, basically discovering himself as like a single man again, and then he has a girlfriend. So I'm just thinking like, well, why aren't we exploring these things more in musical theater? Why is it that the young people always get to get it on? Right? Like, why can't the older people? Because we all have sex lives. We're probably gonna have sex lives until the day we die. So like, those are the things that I really wanted to explore. For the Si Ling Xiu track, I was very interested in exploring this idea of like secrets and cancer, and I did some research, and it turns out it's actually a very common thing, not necessarily an Asian thing, but just all over the world, where people, when they do get like an illness or something, they don't always share it with their family members because they feel like it's going to burden them or something. And then, so I was just really interested in terms of that tension and the reason like why someone would not want to share that sort of big secret and that sort of big burden with them. For me, I'm also a very nosy person. I love talking to people. I love meeting people. So I ask them very deep questions. And I guess people sense that, I'm not trying to be nosy for the sake of being nosy, and I'm generally trying to understand what the way they're like. So they tend to be pretty open with me about their lives. So I find that, really, really helpful and inspiring when it comes to like creating characters, because a lot of times the names in the show are people that I've known before. So if you have had an impact in my life, good or bad, you'll probably end up in a show of mine one of these days.
One thing that really strikes me when you talk about your artistic process, like specifically in terms of character development, which of course is such an important part of your work, is it's very much macro to micro. You're very deliberate. You're like, I want to address this theme that I identify. I want to highlight this age group of people that I feel are underrepresented in musicals and in culture. And you really work backwards from that, which is so interesting because I feel like a lot of artists can't do that. They have to just make work and sort of back out into the important themes, but you're very intentional.
Yeah, I think it's because I have very specific things that I want to address and I want to say, and then really delving into it and finding the character. That's really more of my way of like, well, how can I highlight this issue more effectively? It's an issue is always more effective when it's no longer an issue. It's a story. It's a person that you can relate to. But if I don't have the issue and if I don't have the overarching thing, I myself sort of lose interest in it, because at the end of the day, it's sort of like, why am I telling the story why am I putting this on stage as opposed to like just telling a story to like my partner or something like that, So I think like once you have the platform, you want to be able to address very specific issues, inequities that you see, or just things that, maybe do not have representation on stage. Maybe I do want to be able to represent those things. So that's just the way I think. I don't think it's any wrong or any different from any other artist going from like a small character and then building upwards. That's a perfectly fine way. But I guess that's just the way my brain works in terms of like creating work.
I mean, just listening to you talk about your characters, they seem so well developed. And I'm kind of curious, just as a visual artist, instinct and intuition plays so much part of like my own process. And I'm wondering how does that work in terms of how do you know who to cast as your actor? Like, do you get like a ping, or like, what is that process like?
So traditionally, I write the show first. And then when it's time to do the show, we'll do like a casting, we'll have auditions where people come in. And I can tell you most of the time there is a ping. Like when the person is right for the role, you know it instantly. Like they sort of like really understand the character inside out without you even having to like coach them or direct them. And then you know that that is going to be the right person for the role. For Lucky 88, I sort of did it a little bit differently this time around because I knew there was going to be a world premiere. I thought, hey, why don't I just write the roles around specific people that I knew? So I was working with a bunch of really, really wonderful and talented actors anyway. And I was thinking like, well, why don't I write it around those people? So I did have a bunch of people in mind and I did write it around like their vocal types. So some of the songs are quite difficult to sing, but then I wrote it for a very, very specific person in mind. So that person has no problem singing the songs. My question, I guess in the future is like, if I'm going to cast someone else, I don't know if they're going to be able to do the same thing, but I guess we can always lower the keys or something. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I was just going to say casting or writing for a specific person ended up causing problems later post-COVID, right?
It can, but I think it really depends on the range. Like for example, like one of Mei Ling's songs is Spring in January, and I wrote it initially for like this actress who's like a high soprano coloratura, so it's like insane high notes, like high C's all the way. I've been finding it really, really difficult for other subsequent actors to sort of even inhabit the role. So I think practically speaking, I am going to have to like shift the keys down so that it's a more accessible to like more people. And I mean, the great thing about music is that, you know, you can always transpose the key. So it's not as if like it's, you know, you're stuck with the music or something like that. So that's perfectly fine.
And Marcus, when we're thinking of the impact and the people that you've met, you know, that you've encountered on a daily basis, we all wear many hats and we have different identities. And other than being an artist, you are also an immigration lawyer. So that to me was fascinating. Do you think that your practice in immigration law has sort of informed you about a specific point of view or even character development? Has that helped you somewhat? Because being a lawyer is also almost like being a therapist. You hear people's, you know, ailments and stories and struggles.
Oh yeah, definitely. So for the most part of my professional legal life, I've actually been working in the nonprofit. So I've worked with victims of domestic violence, victims of 9/11, children who have been abused, abandoned, and neglected by their parents, low-income New Yorkers in all boroughs except Staten Island. I actually used to work at the Flushing Immigration Center on Prince Street in Flushing. Hi, Susan, if you're there. That's my coworker from that time, and I think she's still there. And you meet a lot of different people, and you know, when you're an attorney, there's a reason why it's confidential because people tell you their deep dark secrets anyway. I'm not saying that I take their deep dark secrets and put it on stage, but I can tell you, like, you really see multiple sides of people. And also because of the types of work that I've done, I've seen many age groups from very, very young children to like really, really old and advanced adults till the end of their life. I've had several of my clients die and I had to go visit them in the hospital all the way to the end, had to deal with the wills and all that kind of thing. So just the range of experience definitely is super helpful in terms of informing and writing characters. I think for any artist, you need to live. You need to live a long and prosperous, not prosperous, but more like you need to go out there and not be afraid to make mistakes and actually go do things and not just hide in your room and like create a song or something like that. If you don't meet people, then your song will have no life. I think in addition to that, meeting lots of people with different experiences who are going to be different from you is also going to be extremely informative. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very hard to be racist when you meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds, because you're like, I wish I could say like Black people are like this or Asian people are like this, but when you meet so many different people, you're like, you just can't say that, because I'm like, I know 5 different people who are not like that. And you know, so in your mind, like, you just can't be racist anymore, because it's like, I wish I could, but like no, like there's just so many different types of people. They're going to be annoying people in every single racial background, but they're also going to be really, really wonderful and inspiring people of every single racial background as well.
Maybe everybody should experience what you've experienced in your practice, sort of be sent.
Yes.
For any problematic personalities, they should sort of definitely experience your profession.
Yes, definitely.
I remember when when the art commissioners were reviewing your work, you had a previous work sample that really had a hilarious, darkly hilarious dialogue between an immigration officer and someone applying for citizenship, I believe. And I think it was Bronca that was like, this is hilarious and sadly true. And then we read that you were an immigration lawyer and you're like, oh, it all makes sense. He has firsthand experience with this.
Yeah, I felt like a deja vu in essence, what my family has been gone through, what I've personally gone through. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. This is like real, and it's funny because it's true. So that's
Yeah,
Not
absolutely.
funny,
yeah. I mean, it's funny in general. I mean, life is, imitates
Well,
art.
if you can't laugh at it, we're just gonna cry about it, right? Especially like
Yeah.
now with the coronavirus, like, well, let's just laugh about it, just get through it. It will be through sooner or later, but we will get
Yeah.
through this.
Yeah.
We can laugh and cry. It's not mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
So I just want to turn the conversation a little bit from Marcus to the art commissioners. And that, as we've mentioned, you all were tasked with reviewing really dozens and dozens of proposals and ultimately deciding which 2 projects should receive $10,000 commissions. Can you talk a little bit about what you've spoken to this already, but what that hasn't been mentioned stood out to you about Marcus's project, and why did you think this untold story would resonate with the community of Flushing? Yayun, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned a little bit in the first part of the conversation. I think what really stand out is the story, and there's just something really real about the characters in Marcus' proposal, and I think that really, I mean, upon reviewing a lot of proposal, I mean, sometimes, like you don't really feel that kind of human temperatures in there. And I think that's really important for me, and especially when we are considering, artworks that would resonate with people in the community. So that's something that really stick in my mind.
I believe in my viewpoint, I saw Marcus's work so far as sort of this sort of very brilliant attempt to bring out what is perceived as a very insular community, right? Like everybody perceives Flushing and different Asian communities of Flushing as the others, or they other them. So I guess Marcus's account is sort of trying to break away from that and show these communities live the same struggles and the same issues and the same family problems or health problems than anybody else does, and to sort of create a vision of them as less foreigners, less outsiders and more insiders, not as like perpetual foreigners as everybody sees that, right? Like everybody looks at Flushing. If you meet a random person that lives in New York, whether it's a native New Yorker or somebody who, is a transplant, they keep saying, oh yeah, I'm going to the Flushing food courts. That's the food mecca. That's all they need, though. That's all they want. But at the same time, I feel like Marcus's musical will help people of different backgrounds, understand that, people, the communities of Flushing, specifically different Asian communities of Flushing, are not to be treated as outsiders.
Right, like this isn't a destination or an other that you go to if you want to try another Chinatown outside of Manhattan, but these are real people with lives and complex stories that are worthy of being told.
And for me, similar to the other art commissioners' sentiments, I really appreciated the fact that Flushing was central to the theme of Marcus's project, and the fact that these stories and these characters are deeply kind of examined. Whereas if you watch some films, sometimes the Asian person, they're just whitewashed, they're not even played by white people. So to bring that lens, deeply and in a central focused way is what really stood out. So
yeah, totally. So Yayun, Bronca, you both are either running arts organizations or are a major part of running arts organizations in Flushing. Yayun, how at Flushing Town Hall do you all work to ensure that the programming that you are creating and highlighting reflects the priorities of the Flushing community?
That's a very good question. Maybe I guess I'll start with Flushing Town Hall's mission. Flushing Town's mission is to bring people together by presenting arts from around the globe. So as an art organization, we have been presenting programs from, a lot of different cultural backgrounds, like Korean, South Asian, Latinx, Chinese, African American cultures and communities. And it's naturally very fitting because we're in Queens, and Queens is one of the most diverse neighborhood in the world. Flushing Town Hall set up my position about 5 years ago, and my position is sort of like the bridge between Flushing Town Hall and the Chinese community. And I mean, one thing I wanted to say is Flushing is a very, very diverse community. Chinese population probably there's a lot of, maybe make up the most of the Flushing population, but at the same time, there is a very big Korean community and South Asian community. But what we've been doing in our model is we create different partnerships with community members, stakeholders, and work with them to develop programs that are relevant to the community. So one example is we have a Chinese culture committee, and the committee is made up by members from the community, and they bring voices of the community into Flushing Town Hall. We also have, a very deep relationship with local arts organization. One example is the Kunchu Society. So Kunchu is one kind of Chinese opera, and every year we plan a program to teach about this art form with the society. But I mean, just, you can imagine because of different partners, every project has a different focus. So, sometimes it's can be overwhelming. Some of the example of our program can be, the obvious one can be celebrating traditional Chinese holiday, right? For example, Lunar New Year, Mid-Autumn Festival, Dragon Boat Festival, Winter Solstice, right? Or sometimes the program can be celebrating traditional art form, but at the same time, we also think it's equally important to present artists who are working in contemporary art form. So this project is a good example, and we, very grateful that QCA is our partner, having a very long relationship with in the community with local artists. So, yeah, I mean, partnerships is, we have similar visions, and we all have different resources. So we, just work together and make something happen. And so, yeah, in this case, QCA has the funding to support Marcus to develop new work, and Flushing Town Hall has a theater. So originally, if the program is still going, as a physical program, we would offer our space for Marcus to rehearse the show and having the premiere in our theater. So I think those are some of the ways we try to bring in community voices and try to engage the community.
Great, thank you. Well, I am ready to see another clip. I don't know about you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Marcus, can you introduce the second sneak peek of your musical that you're going to play for us?
Yes, so the next song is actually called Eating Hot Noodles When It Snows, and it's sung by Brandon Wang. So as I said before, it's the whole conflict between I lied to my dad because I want to go to culinary school, Shen Zha, his father, finds out about it. There's a huge fight. And this is the part where they try to reconcile. So Brendan sings this song, trying to explain to his father why exactly he dropped out of law school and why he wants to go to culinary school. So let's check it out.
I just didn't want to let you down. I saw how much you wanted it and I tried. I really tried to make myself want it, but after that first week of law school, I just felt really trapped. Like I couldn't breathe. And then I came here and you made me a bowl of noodles, and then I remembered something. I was 9 or 10, it was the middle of December, and it had started to snow. In a fight at school again over what I can't remember, but I was feeling very low. You made me a bowl of noodles, hand-pulled of course. It made me feel so much better. It warmed me to my soul, went right to the source. This is what I remember. Warmth and comfort that fills you up here, a radiating inner glow. No second guessing, no time for fear. Safe so you can let go. No other feeling hits it on the nose, like eating hot noodles when it snows. You watched me while you cooked, we had no babysitter, but I never did mind. Always happy you looked, though your life was bitter. You always taught me to be kind. The customers all loved you, it was your gentle way. You always remembered their order. It was like you always knew what they needed that day. Kindness transcends all borders. Warmth and comfort that filled them up here, a radiating inner glow. It made everything suddenly seem clear, made time start to slow. No other feeling hits it on the nose, like eating hot noodles when it snows. I saw the way you could make people feel, just with the power of food. Comfort them and help them heal, make them feel good. You taught me everything you knew, how to pull the noodle stew, the meat, how to boil tender shoots of bamboo, how to never accept defeat. Food is my passion, not the law, all because you showed me how. I thought I was searching for something more. I think I found it now. Found the warmth and comfort that fills you up here, a radiating inner glow. A sense of knowing what exactly is dear, a warmth that comes from below. No other feeling just hits it on the nose, like eating hot noodles when it snows. Like eating hot noodles when it snows. When it snows.
That one was one of my favorites.
Definitely is. I was just thinking about a few sort of topics that are not just common for the Asian community, but sort of overarchingly for any sort of immigrant communities and their struggles, especially parents versus children. And one of the things when immigrants are coming into this country is sort of having preconceived notions of let's call them sort of colonial legacies, and sort of through media and cultural consumption that we get, you have these preconceived notions of what an American dream is, what US is, and many parents and many young people get really, really disappointed once they do come in and don't achieve those ideals that they were striving for when they came to US. So I guess my convoluted question to you, Marcus, would be that can you talk a little bit more about the how does the storyline sort of reflect immigrant parents' perception of success, achievement, ambition, and what are their expectations for how the children should sort of construct their futures?
Definitely. So for the characters in the show, and I'm specifically talking about Shen Zha and Si Ling, they definitely want their kids to go to school. They definitely want the kids to go to college, graduate, and get a degree, preferably in something practical like accounting, law, or something like that. The arts is not recommended because not a good idea. It does not pay the bills. There's no stability, that sort of thing. I think I definitely experienced a little bit about that with my parents. My parents are actually really liberal and modern kind of people. So they did not push back on my idea that I wanted to go study musical theater for undergrad. Actually, we did have that conversation about like, well, what are you going to be doing for money and all that kind of thing. But eventually, it came down to the whole like, if this is what you want to do, we'll support it. And later on, I was the one that decided that I wanted to go to law school because I wanted to be able to have a career that would basically last me all the way until like the end of my brain, basically. So it was really important for me to want to go to law school. And of course, my parents were super thrilled when that happened, but they never like pushed me and told me like, you have to go to law school or something like that. In fact, I know a lot of parents, a lot of Asian parents, a lot of my friends who actually their parents forced them to go to law school. They really did not like it. And then they ended up either dropping out or not really embracing the law or doing, or, just basically deciding to rebel against their parents and not do anything or just go and be artists anyway. And so mine's actually the reverse experience when it comes to like these characters. But yeah, definitely there is this strong, I don't even think it's like an Asian thing. Sometimes I think like when you're an immigrant family and you're coming from maybe a lower income, you sort of perceive as things like the law and engineering and all that kind of thing as sort of like stable jobs. But of course, given like our economic climate and also like how things are shifting over a long period of time, there is no such thing as a stable job anymore. You could be let go anytime at any day. There is no like, oh my God, once we get a job, we're going to stay for it for the rest of our lives. That's really not a thing anymore. So I think it's really more about, in this show for me, it's about encountering this idea of like what it means to have success and maybe to find a different way of success as well. And maybe success really is about finding the joy in what you do and just really enjoying it. And maybe sometimes it just really doesn't make a lot of money, but the thing is that as long as you can pay the bills, you are fine, then I would say like that is truly a success already. You're living the dream that you wanted to live. If you want to leave that behind and choose to go into something else, which is what I did, I ended up doing I ended up doing law and art, so I can't really say like I chose one path or the other, but it's more of like you find the path that makes you the happiest. And I think that that's true success, right? Because if you're not happy at what you do, whether or not it's art, whether it's law, then that's not really successful to me at all.
Yeah, and absolutely you can be both. I mean, as you're saying, like you can be an artist, you can be a lawyer, you can be an engineer and a sculptor. You don't have to be just this one personality, one identity. So I think this is sort of a really great take on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jamie, I think you're muted.
Well, I was going to say, I don't have a question for you, Marcus, but I do have a reaction to the song. I mean, really kind of miss the food court so much.
Yes.
My background.
I know, I love it. It makes me feel like I'm back at the food court. Is that New World Mall?
Yes.
Yes.
The one and only.
Yes.
I think what you were saying about this mythology that certain jobs are secure and others are not. I mean, obviously there's some truth to that, but this moment, if anything, is telling us how tenuous the workforce is. And I think we're seeing that evolve in real life, in real time in Flushing. there's this parallel happening between your fictional piece and then the real developments that are taking place in Flushing food courts.
Yeah, maybe on that parallel existence too. I mean, you have these stalls of like different regional foods. Like for instance, you have Northern Chinese dumplings, and also Northern Chinese Korean dumplings, and also like Uyghur food stall. And I feel like, you know, there's so much, you know, not to get so much into politics, but you know, the Uyghurs are really kind of going through a lot of turmoil and suffering with re-education camps that they're being forced to be part of. But somehow in this kind of space of the food court, it seems like the food becomes this kind of unifier and this kind of neutral ground. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Food courts are, you know, amazing. I also really like the idea that in some way it's really reflecting the makeup of the neighborhood. And it's also really interesting to think about all these stalls can exist together, but at the same time, you know, humans are humans. There's always, you know, we can like each other, but at the same time, you know, there's also a lot of drama, you know, going behind. And I think Marcus' work also really just, you know, bring out some of that. And I would say, you know, places like food court really also shows Flushing is a really unique neighborhood. You can't really find any other neighborhood on any parts of the world. It's uniquely American. But, you know, I mean, it's just great that you know, there's a lot of food court in Flushing. New World is definitely one of the biggest one. There's also a lot of other food courts as well.
Yeah, and how have you seen the food courts in Flushing change and evolve post-COVID or in reaction to COVID?
One thing that I heard is that the New World Food Court actually recently was being shut down, because I think people are really excited that, you know, it reopened recently, and the sitting area actually are not supposed to be open during this time, but I think people are getting a little bit too excited about it. So there were some violations, I think, and it was closed down, I think, over the weekend or something. Yeah.
But it's just a temporary closure, right?
Yes, I think for the food court. Yeah, but definitely I hear lots of stories, you know, from people who own business in the neighborhood. Definitely, it's a hard hit, the pandemic. But overall, the neighborhood is going through a lot of different changes as well.
Yeah. Speaking of changes with the neighborhood, I wanted to ask Branka, as a historian and anthropologist, how have you seen the community of Flushing evolve and gentrify in the last few decades?
It's a very sort of complex story. People tend to see it like in a sort of very one-way sense. You're looking at typical sort of white population, majority coming in, gentrifying a neighborhood, prices go up, minorities leave, and so on. And in case of the Flushing, historically, I find it quite amazing that you have this different form of gentrification coming from very affluent. We're talking about since the mid 1970s, even earlier than that, to the sort of the biggest influx was in the 80s and early 90s, of very affluent Taiwanese communities in the beginning, Korean communities, Hong Kong as well, and lately even Singaporeans who have invested businesses in food courts, among many things, shopping malls, and so on. And I have to say, there's always these stories of like now the white sort of minority has sort of had these outcries. So we're talking about a reverse situation. The white minority is basically fighting against the change, whatever that change entails. But the change is basically improving and revitalizing a neighborhood. So Flushing's prosperity basically reflects both sort of a successful investment of these specifically, let's say, Taiwanese and Korean merchants, now even mainline Chinese in the past 10 years or so. So we're looking at basically promoting ethnic diversity. And as Yayun said, this is the true America. This is what we're looking at. This is how the American dream is supposed to be fulfilled. But with that said, talking about the food court scene, there was in the past, let's say, a couple of before COVID, before the disasters happened, there was a different kind of disaster when we're talking about the smaller Asian businesses going down, because as the bigger developers wanted to bring more elite food restaurants, stalls, doctors' offices, and so on. So we're seeing the characters that Marcus is depicting as basically, in reality, losing their own shops. And put the cherry on top with COVID crisis, we don't know what the future holds for them. So we're hopeful that that would sort of change when it comes to gentrification.
Right. So we have the neighborhood evolving and changing in real time. And then within the microcosm of ACP, Marcus's project is evolving because of the creative process. Marcus, how has Lucky 88 changed since you initially proposed it? If anything has changed at all? And if it did, was this a function of the pandemic or purely just a function of the creative process?
I think a little bit of both. I think part of it is also like the ACP process. For me, it was really important for me to sort of engage with the art commissioners, because they were very heavily involved in the Flushing community, to kind of find out what their different perspectives were and what different people could bring to the table. So for example, early on, I asked Branka, do you have any kind of like historical or academic papers that you could send me? So she did send me a bunch of different things, and that actually did make its way into multiple lines into the show. Like for example, one of the characters asked, like Shen Zha asked Mei Ling, have you ever thought about going on a cruise? And that is an indirect reference to a specific paper that she sent to me. It's sort of like a collective, sort of like a memory that was written in the form of academic paper in 2008 about celebrity, it's called Celebrity Travel Agency or something like that. And they were talking about how in the 1980s, nobody ever heard of going on a cruise. But then come like the late 90s, 2000s, everyone in Flushing either has gone on a cruise or like has heard about it. So like that eventually made its way into like the play. And then for the language of the play, I really have to thank Jay Marie for this, because early on, I was trying to figure out like how were the characters going to be speaking English? So Jay Marie actually sent me this book by Hajin called A Good Fall. It's a collection of short stories written by this Chinese person who eventually moved to the United States. And he writes, he's a fluent English speaker and he writes fluently. It's just that there's certain things that make it sound like the person is not an American, which is perfectly fine. So I wanted to sort of like have this, American idiom within the show, but then sort of have a non-American voice to the English as well. So that was really, really helpful in terms of like informing that situation. I also spoke to like Jefferson Mao, the other art commissioner, and he definitely gave me a lot of insight into like his own personal experience growing up in Flushing. I spoke to John Cho, who is the head of like the Greater Chamber of Commerce in Flushing. And we were talking about the whole like issue of gentrification, the money moving in, people being displaced, that sort of thing. And that really gave the backdrop of like why this food court had to be closed at the end of the show, because really the greater picture is this idea of displacement and people moving and change necessary coming from outside, change also coming from inside within the family, or internal change as well. So I thought it was really nice to have that really nice mirror of it happening in society as well. So definitely, because of the ACP process, it definitely has changed a lot. I think in terms of the development, the coronavirus definitely has had more of an impact, because traditionally what I would have done would be to get a bunch of different actors in the room and do different types of workshops when it comes to the show, try it out in person. We have not been able to do any form of group singing at all, because all rehearsals have to be taken on Zoom. So that has been really, really challenging. And of course, with the whole, now that we're not able to do this in person anymore, it's really going to turn into like a stage reading that's going to be like an online thing or something like that. Yeah, so, but I don't know, what about you, Yarin and Bronca? Like, how has the pandemic really changed programming for your arts organization? Like, for the better or for the worse? What do you think?
Well, in our case, I have to say for the better, because I know it's we're talking about a very tragic situation, and in our case, it was since we don't have performance arts, we are our research center. We have multiple exhibitions. The only challenge was actually bringing those exhibitions in a virtual form. But on the other hand, reaching many more different groups of audiences, even across America, for different lectures, screenings featuring stories from, sacred sites of Flushing, accentuating the religious diversity of different temples, churches, mosques, and so on, all the way to LGBTQ rights. So basically just having these Zoom lectures, film screenings, having walking tours with a Google Earth, Google Street View ways really, really democratized the process. A lot of disabled people, a lot of people with, elderly who felt really discouraged and isolated managed to sort of enjoy in our programs. And we did engage in sort of art related programs where there are multiple histories, right? So you're talking about your own identity, the history of your family, maybe of your heritage, and all that was explored through Zoom. And I'll just end with a note that I'm actually more proud of people who are over 80 who managed to connect onto Zoom much easier than any of us did. So we managed to pull off actually a group of Flushing and Elmhurst seniors who were just connecting, doing art sessions, lectures, and so on with us. So in our sense, it was a little bit better, put us on the map.
Yeah, and for us, I think a lot of our experience, really echoes to what Branka shared. I would say though, for Flushing Town Hall, we present a lot of performing arts programs. So in terms of not be able to do live program, that's definitely a little bit tricky for us. But we had successfully launched a virtual series online. So I would love to share with everybody, a very short video about that series. Yeah, so yeah, you'll see
that. Yeah, that was a great video. Fun imaging.
Thank you. Yeah, so you see, we offer, programs, reflecting very different cultural backgrounds, and we have monthly jazz jam that's happening online. You can find a lot of arts and education video series online as well, and to kind of address what has been happening in terms of pandemic and also Black Lives Matters. We also have an on-site exhibition. We're asking anybody who wants to express how they feel, send artworks to us, or bring your artworks to our building. We have a garden with a fence, and people can just share their artworks there. Yeah.
Thank you. So we are running out of time, but I just want to ask one closing question to our three art commissioners, which is that I think what really differentiates ACP is that typically when you have panelists or cultural gatekeepers selecting artists' work, they make their selection in a vacuum and often never meet the artist in question. And something that you all have been able to do is really get to know Marcus and watch this whole process and project evolve. Is there a particular moment that has stood out to you in watching this creative process? Something you found particularly fun or even surprising?
in my case, the exciting part is not only learning through art salons. Each session you learned even more about the creative process, but it's actually taking part in it, which I found really, really fun in sort of living through and by reading the actual script. So interactively taking different roles and enjoying the humor, enjoying the tragic, the senseless discrimination in certain dialogues, or just the tragedy of a mother who's sick, hiding, her story. I just feel like by us reading it, Marcus, I think it was a sort of a brilliant point in making us focus even more to what's going on, to the actual creative evolution of your work.
On that note, I just want to say that for me, it was just not only was it exciting and interesting and to be part of Marcus's process, but also just to see it from proposal to an actual piece that's been developed. So that whole journey has been really rewarding for me, also as a creative person as well. So.
Yeah, I remember you saying like, oh my gosh, it's come so far in just a matter of a few months. I don't know if that's just Marcus working very quickly or the sheltering in place being sort of a blessing in disguise, at least in terms of the artistic process.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think it's, along the way, there's a lot of surprises. Talking to Marcus and getting to know him more, it's really fun, and also get to know more of each art commissioners. We all come from very different backgrounds, have different jobs, but somehow are related to the Flushing community. So I think a great part of it is I learn much, much more about the neighborhood and the community. I think this is just never end. Flushing is just a great and unique neighborhood, and there's always more to be learned about and to be surprised with.
Great, thank you. I think that's a great note to end on. I want to thank the four of you for being part of this panel, contributing your insights, Marcus, your videos. I also want to thank our leading lady behind the scenes, Mary Ellen, who has flawlessly executed these ACP Live streams and event series. If you all want to contribute to this initiative, all the proceeds for this event will be evenly split between the ACP artists, Flushing Town Hall, and Queens Historical Society. To donate, the link is in the event description. Also, Flushing Town Hall and PCA are partnering up again to virtually showcase the full musical of Lucky 88 in early October. So keep an eye out for that. We'll shoot you an email when everything is finalized. And in the meantime, you can also go ahead and register for our other Flushing awardees world premiere on September 2nd. If you go to queenscouncilarts.org, you'll see that specially processed American Me up and ready to receive RSVPs. So again, thank you so much for the entire team. It's really lovely to chat with you. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Pleasure. Good night, everyone.